The New South Wales Police, police force, police service, whatever you want to call them, the New South Wales Police. Now, I've got a long history with these guys, and they are the elephant in the room. So, what are the New South Wales Police, and where do they come from? So, Australia started. New South Wales is a state of Australia. It's the main state, the most populous state of Australia. So Australia started as a penal colony for the British. As the story goes, all the criminals and undesirables of Britain were rounded up, shipped off to Australia, and turned into slaves to build the new world. So as the story goes, this is the dregs of society according to the narrative. Well, it's funny that because a lot of the world's best inventions and highest IQs come from Australia. So clearly this isn't the bottom end dregs of society. So what happened was a lot of people were criticised. A lot of people were enslaved and shipped off to the other side of the world, betrayed by their own government for being political adversaries. And people were rampantly being accused of things like stealing an apple, and stealing an apple with no evidence of it being done was enough to the general accusation to kidnap, imprison, and ship them off to Australia as slaves. Now, Australian slaves were betrayed by their own government that they didn't install, that was installed upon them by force, the British monarchy. And the British people, my ancestors, my people, are the most betrayed and sabotaged and oppressed people in the world, and they were treated under the worst slave conditions in the world, contrary to popular belief. And the very word slave comes from white slaves, from the white Slavs. I'm not a Slav. I'm of Western Northern European. Slavs are the Eastern white people, but my ancestors nonetheless were of the same race of them as the most enslaved people in the world, and they were under the worst conditions of slavery, betrayed by their own government. So this all started as this monarchy, corrupt government conspiracy to enslave their own people and murder and torture their own people for entertainment, and enslave them to build them profits in another country. So the whole thing was corrupt to begin with. So the New South Wales Police started as slavers. These were the people, the betrayers, the traitors of their own country, of their own people, enslaving, torturing, and murdering their own people. This is what the New South Wales Police were from their inception. This is what they are today. They are corrupt, conspiring, traitorous slavers. That's what they are. So eventually, these white people, my ancestors, they worked very hard, and they never committed any crimes, and everyone knew it was all a big scam. A lot of them were eventually freed, and they went on to build the most advanced country in the world, number one in the world in the education index. Number two, I think it's just slidden down to number 3 now, but historically it was number 2 in the Human Development Index. It is at the top of the world, despite this corruption and all these other shit. Australians have had the weight that real Australians, have had to carry all these centuries. So my people, my ancestors, have gone from the very rock bottom, far lower than all these other so-called slaves that were never really slaves to begin with, and their very ancestors were slavers. But my ancestors were from the rock bottom to the very top. They went from one extreme to the other, all through hard work. So the New South Wales Police, they were corrupt from the very start. Totally, entirely, extremely corrupt from the very start. And there's always been this culture of corruption. So as things became more civilized, and the police were and the government were losing power to the population. And things happened especially after World War II. I'll get to that too. It's important to mention as it relates to this. But the New South Wales police, they were like a government unto themselves. They were like a separate government, just like a military is like a separate government. The police were their own government, and they were heavily connected to all kinds of corruption. They were central to all corruption. All kinds of drug dealing, assassinations, you name it. Fraud, everything. Police have always been central to this. They're not the people who stop that. They're the people doing it. And they always have been. So the New South Wales police, they had to learn ways to become very underhanded about it and covert. And they historically and especially presently, they are very, very stupid. Arrogant and stupid. The combination of extreme arrogance and stupidity is very dangerous. But they operate in a system that was built by other people, corrupt people who are the only way to survive was the intelligent corrupt people had to devise a system of getting away with this corruption and doing it under the table. And there's a whole culture to this corruption, to this police corruption, that they are indoctrinated into. So if you become a new police officer, what they do is they run you through this system. And they teach you that you don't dob on your other officers, or this is what happens to you. But they don't say things directly. They show you by example. They show you examples of what happens, so they don't have any direct ties to it. And there's a highly refined system of corruption involved here, but there are stupid people operating it. It was built by people in the past, and it's just maintained by people who just follow the Bible, the corruption Bible. Of how you do things, and even if they don't understand it, they just all they understand is that you do this and you get away with it. This is how you get away with it. Words cannot explain how corrupt the New South Wales police force is, or police service. It should be actually a service. I'll get to that too. So much to mention here. So New South Wales Police is the third largest police force or service or whatever you want to call it. The third largest police in the world. In one of the smallest populations in the world. Like one of the lowest density populations in the world. It's like one of the few, like the rock bottom population densities of the world in the third world largest police in the world. So this is the world's prime example of a police state and of police corruption and of everything that's wrong with police. People don't even know what the word police means. Police, policy, politician, from the Greek word polis. People don't understand where it all comes from and what it's supposed to mean and how it's been corrupted and twisted into something it's not. That's another story. It's too much to mention. It's another story entirely. But to the New South Wales police, I'm trying not to say force because I don't agree with it with police being a force, but they're the third world largest police in the world in one of the lowest populations in the world. And words cannot describe how corrupt they are. And I've given examples on my YouTube channel of this police corruption. I've got tons and tons of files on this stuff. I've been kidnapped and tortured multiple times over this corruption, police corruption. So there's a lot of topics that overlap with this corruption because this police corruption is involved in a lot of things. And in the 1990s, there was a Royal Commission, the Wood Royal Commission, and you look this up, the Wood Royal Commission or the Police Inquisition, as it was called. New South Wales police corruption was notorious around the world. It was the shit stain of all police around the world. It discredited all police around the world, and no police in any other country liked them. They hated the New South Wales police because it gave them a bad name. And what happens with this corruption, as I said, this kind of system of corruption is, how it works is, if anyone talks about it, you disappear. You're framed, you're assassinated, or a lot of the time, you're kidnapped by psychiatry. Now, the world's most notorious psychiatrist and the worst horror stories of psychiatry, kidnapping and torturing, mutilating and murdering people under bizarre accusations, it happens in New South Wales. It happened to me. I've gone through examples and some videos of the bizarre shit they've accused me of. It's ridiculous, like being a vampire and a werewolf. It's fucking ridiculous, and this shit goes through the legal system. So most people who criticise or even talk about New South Wales police corruption, they are kidnapped by psychiatry, and they're labelled with a mental illness, and they disappear behind closed doors. Horrific things are done to them, and then they die. And anyone who talks about that, you also have a mental illness too. Anyone who talks about the corruption has a mental illness. Anyone who talks about what happens to anyone who talks about corruption has a mental illness. So if you do this for decades and decades, you practically get away with it because this corruption isn't just involved with the New South Wales Police Force. It involves people in key positions of social services, medical services, politicians who stay away from it and they avoid it, and they only deal directly with this crap when they need to. They try to distance themselves away from it because they're the most publicly targeted over this. So they have no direct ties as much as they can over this. But there's key government services involved, and they work in tandem with each other to frame, entrap, imprison, and assassinate people and get away with it. There's a whole system of corruption that's been going for a long time. And it's especially gone hardcore since since World War II ended. And there's stages that have happened like the 1970s and then post-2000s as well, where it's just got massively worse due to 9/11 and stuff like that, and the multiculturalism campaign in the 1970s. There's so much corruption going on here, I couldn't begin to go through it. As I've shown in my files, I've got a shitload of files of this crap. I mean, they tried to assassinate me an hour after I went public to every mainstream news network. Now, all the mainstream news networks, they're all in on it. You criticise government corruption and something happens to you. A lot of things happen to you. So, what was I going to mention here? There's so much to mention here with this police corruption. So, the 1990s, there was New South Wales police assassinated a Queensland, another state of Australia, Queensland, a Queensland high-ranking intelligence agent or something like that. I think it was something like that, a government informant or something. They blew the whistle on New South Wales corruption, and the New South Wales police did what they did. They assassinated him, and it was well known that they did this. So there was so much, all the criticism of New South Wales police, people who aren't allowed to speak up because they get kidnapped by psychiatry if they do, or they just get framed and assassinated and shit if they can't get them through psychiatry. A lot of these people started standing up and get very loudly and all together, and they couldn't get rid of all of these people at the same time because too many people would ask questions. So the government was forced to do a royal commission, which is like an inquisition, an investigation into internal corruption of the New South Wales police after this assassination of a high-ranking government official. Now, it was that much of a big deal, and it had been kept under wraps for as much as they could for so long, and it had boiled under the surface for a long time. And this was a big deal. It was not just a New South Wales incident. It wasn't just an Australian incident. This was an international issue, a global issue regarding police corruption. The whole world was watching. So they brought in the world's so-called leading expert, Peter Ryan, the world's leading expert on corruption. Peter Ryan from the UK, from the other side of the world. They brought someone from the other side of the world to the best in the world of dealing with corruption to come and sort out this inquisition and fix a problem. They tried to frame and assassinate him as well. All kinds of shit happened, and if you look on YouTube, you look up Wood Royal Commission or the Inquisition. I've got one of these videos uploaded myself on one of my channels. But if you look that stuff up on YouTube, you're able to see a documentary covering some basics of this Royal Commission that happened. It was a very big deal. And Peter Ryan, the world's leading expert in corruption, in the end, he said that the New South Wales police were that corrupt to the extreme, and absolutely corrupt from top to bottom, and it went right to the top of government. And these people were that corrupt and universally corrupt. All of them are corrupt. Not some of them, not most of them. All of them were corrupt. Totally corrupt. It was that bad, and there was such a culture of corruption in the New South Wales police that the only way to fix it was to completely disassemble the entire New South Wales police. Do not leave a trace of it left standing. Sack every single police officer. Don't let them ever work for the government ever again. And completely start again with a new police force from scratch. That was his solution. This is the world's leading expert in corruption. He says that this is as bad as it can get. It literally cannot get any worse, and there is absolutely nothing salvageable from this organization. It is a rogue, corrupt organization. It is the essence of corruption, and it is completely irredeemable. And this is the world's leading expert in corruption saying this. There's a lot more to this. If you look up the documentary on this matter, you'll be able to see some more examples of what happened. I've been involved in things like this for a long time, but a lot of the corruption happened in my local areas, in the Central Coast, where I grew up. This Central Coast of New South Wales, Wyong and Gosford Shoals, now the Central Coast Council. These were among the top of this corruption. And there are so many stories I could say on this corruption, things you just would not believe if I told you. This is the worst of the worst of the worst. So the world's leading expert in corruption says that this is the only way to fix it. It's completely unfixable. Just destroy the whole thing. Completely. Every single trace of it. This is the main point I wanted to mention here. When it comes to police corruption, if police are trying to arrest you for something you haven't done, and they're breaking the law, and they're just making up false witness testimony of themselves and shit like that, don't mean stuff like, or if they pull a gun on you or whatever, it doesn't matter that they work for the government. It doesn't matter that they have a police badge. They pull a gun on you, kill them. Every single one of them. And then go after everyone else involved and kill them too. This is your right to self-defense. Your right to self-defense overrules any government official. And this is the very spirit and rule of law. That you have rights that overrule everyone else. Especially the government. That is the whole spirit of law. To prevent this kind of thing from happening. So what the New South Wales police have done, they've just inverted everything upside down. Left is right, up is down, right is wrong. Good is evil. They just divert everything into its opposite. And just lie and pretend. So whenever you're abused by a corrupt police officer, don't tolerate that shit. Record everything. Stand up to them. And if they pull a gun on you, or they threaten to pull a gun on you, shoot the fucker. And upload it everywhere. Don't tolerate this evil, corrupt shit. These are the most pathetic failures of life. I don't even classify them as human. They didn't grow into a proper person. They're not a complete person. They're corrupted. They are a corrupted part of a person. Like a virus. A lot of people don't consider a virus as being alive. Because they're a broken piece of life. They are some broken code of life functioning as a parasite. And this is what the New South Wales police are. And not some of them, not most of them. Every single one. So let's say that the government corruption's fixed and there's this big inquisition in corruption and we can weed it all out. Let's just I've got plans of how to get to that point, and I can't talk about, but let's just say we're at that point where the government is fixed and then we deal with police corruption. What you do, just to proof of point, is you do what I said. You sack every single cop. You start over from scratch, just as Peter Ryden said, because I agree with him wholeheartedly, with what he said there at least. And you imprison every single New South Wales police officer. You imprison every single one of them until further notice. And then you perform an investigation on every single one of them. And despite what people say, it does not cost a lot of money. It costs shit all. And regardless, none of those officers will ever, those who are proven innocent, will never be allowed to work for the government again, and they'll have a permanent mark on their record, and they'll have heavy restrictions. Because even the best of these are corrupt, because one can legitimately argue that this corruption is so rampant and widespread that I argue a position of saying, if you've been a police officer in the New South Wales Police for more than 6 months, you have no excuse that you don't know about this corruption. And if you haven't tried to dob on it, you haven't actively tried to expose it in a reasonable manner, then you are part of it, whether you admit it or not. It's already well established that this corruption is universal. So I would say every police officer who has been a police officer for more than 6 months, every one of them are guilty and should be in prison for life. Now, what I argue is what is already the law is government officials, people who have positions of power in government, and they abuse those positions of power. They normally, according to law, suffer a 5 to 10 times the punishment as a civilian. Sometimes zero tolerance extreme punishments, even beyond that. But at least 5 and usually 10 times the punishment. That's according to law that's already established, and it's pretty much usually the standard worldwide. Obviously, that's not happening. They're doing the opposite. They're just getting away with it. So every single police officer, unless they can prove themselves innocent. So if they've been with the police force for more than 6 months, they need to prove that they have actively and reasonably taken reasonable steps to expose police corruption, and they must have a completely clean record themselves at the same time. Only they will get out of jail. And if you've been working under 6 months, you're still heavily investigated like everyone else, and if you're guilty, you're guilty. A precedent needs to be set for these corrupt pieces of shit. Zero tolerance. This is what happens when you're given government powers and you abuse those powers. Extreme response. This is the essence, the spirit of the law. The punishment of law is there to intimidate evil. It's not meant there to intimidate good people. It's meant there to intimidate evil people, to show them, if you do this, that is what's going to happen to you. And you need to prove it by example by actually doing it. If you're not going to do it, then they're not going to be intimidated because they know that's not going to happen. This, in order to maintain civilization, extreme measures need to be taken on these people. Now, I support even more extreme measures than imprisoning all these police officers for the rest of their lives, confiscating all of their life savings because they've earned this illegitimately, all their possessions, take everything away from them, and use that to support the victims and to undo the damage they've done. So confiscate absolutely everything from them, everything without exception, and imprison them for life, and force them into a lifetime of slavery, or you might call it indentured servitude. Now, this happens in prisons, people where they're forced to work all the time. People don't understand what goes on out there and the morality of it. So, I support certain types of slavery. If you're a criminal who've done serious crimes over and over, then you must be forced to work for that back. I mean, any crime that you've done, you must be forced to work it back. To undo as much damage as you can. You can't undo what was done, but you can reverse at least some of the damage to at least a reasonable degree, and you must be forced to work for that. Every perpetrator of a victim crime. So I support more extreme measures than that. I support bringing the death penalty back into Australia exclusively for government officials who are corrupt, who hurt innocent people. Those with victim crimes, not victimless crimes. Victimless crimes have they should be dealt harshly with when it comes to government officials as well. But I'm talking especially when it comes to crimes where people are targeted, framed, assassinated, kidnapped, tortured, mutilated, things like that was done to me, and I'm still a fugitive without a crime at the moment because of it, because there's no rule of law. But all this evil shit that goes on, the death penalty 100% of the time. Cross a certain line, start hurting people with your government powers, abusing your government powers to hurt people, you die. Everything you ever earned, your whole legacy is taken from you. Every cent you ever have in your bank account, your family doesn't get access to it. Anything that your family has gained from you can be taken from them as well. From anyone who you've given stuff to. Track down every cent and take it back. And kill the fuckers. This is how you restore the rule of law. Through the death penalty. Abusing government powers is the extreme zero tolerance requirement of the rule of law. This must happen with zero tolerance. Do not move that line. You abuse your government powers to target people, you die. You don't allow corruption to thrive. You don't allow corruption to even be planted. You constantly weed the garden. What's happened is the total opposite. The flowers have been weeded and the weeds have been planted. It's the total opposite. A lot of people argue, oh, it's such a big problem, how do I even fix it? The solution is pretty damn fucking simple. You kill a fucking lot of them. So in Australian law, the worst you can do now is pretty much imprison them for life. So start with that. Imprison the whole lot of them for life, and then bring in the death penalty, and then execute them after bringing in the death penalty. But this is assuming that you've already resolved government corruption, and there's some kind of rule of law to begin with. So there are before New South Wales police corruption is dealt with, there's a lot of other things that need to be dealt with, all at the same time anyway. And the solutions are there, and they're real, and they're crystal clear for those who can say in quiet places what cannot be said publicly. Things that are going on in the world right now are happening for a reason. So, in time, every one of these corrupt New South Wales police officers, will be executed. And if any of them want to watch this video, this better fucking haunt you. Because you got justice coming to you, buddy. The whole fucking lot of you. Now, what I support is the weak idea. So, what you do, you initiate this inquisition of police, this one inquisition to solve all police corruption totally, is you say, look, this is what we're going to do, and we're gonna a lot of you are going to die. We're going to bring in the death penalty in the future, and we're going to imprison you until then we're going to kill you. And we know the corruption that's going on. Your lies have no power here, and most of them you're just going to die. So if you're one of these police officers who are not corrupt, this is your chance to fight corruption right now. Expose all your peers. You got a week. After that week goes, you never get a second chance again. And this is your week chance to blow the whistle on your peers of their corruption. And this wouldn't even be necessary, but it's very helpful. It doesn't give you any kind of if you've done this corruption and you're found guilty and you've proven that you've done some bad shit, you get no leniency whatsoever. But if you are one of the police officers who have worked for longer than 6 months, and it was even applied to people under 6 months, but if you've especially been working over 6 months and you haven't done anything about police corruption, and you have some kind of justified reason for it, then here is your one chance at proving it. This is your one chance, and you've got a week to do it. So just imagine the consequences of that. The corrupt are going to freak out. They're not going to change their ways. They're going to freak out and they're going to expose their true colors. And anyone who is in some kind of unique situation where they couldn't speak out, but they're trying to fight it, this is their chance to prove it. So imagine the state of police after that. They won't know who they're going to trust. And their whole alliance of lies is going to fall apart. So what you're doing is you're reducing the short-term damage, in the short term, the long-term damage in the short term. You're significantly reducing any damage they do until they're all brought in. Now, I support these drastic measures against New South Wales Police, and to a lesser degree, but a significant degree, I support the same thing happening all around the world. People don't understand what the police are, what they're supposed to do, what they're supposed to be. And this is a long story. I could talk hours on this, so I won't talk about all that now. But understand where the word police comes from. Police, policy, politician, polis, from the Greek word polis. And understand what the rule and spirit of law is, how it's all been corrupted and inverted into its total opposite. The point here I'm saying is, hold your governments accountable. Don't talk about it. Fucking do it. If you see a corrupt police officer doing some bad shit, deal with him personally. Don't try and deal with him in the legal system and pay a fortune of money through a legal system that serves that police officer's agenda anyway. They're all cover for each. No, you can't win by playing their system. It doesn't work that way. Now, you enforce the law personally. You are the law. They are not the law. You are the law. They are a parasite, lying hypocrite, thug. They are a failure at life and they don't deserve to live. They have lost their right to life. It's important to understand that when it comes to the New South Wales Police, 100% of them are at fault. Even those who do blow the whistle on corruption, they're not pure themselves. They're involved in a lot of other corrupt shit to begin with. They've just decided they just got a certain thing that they have an issue with, and then they'll talk about that. But they won't talk about all the other shit that goes on because they're part of that too. So just because a police officer does blow the whistle on some corruption doesn't mean he's not corrupt himself. But this is really bad. This corruption is truly extreme, and you must take the law into your own hands. The most important part of this is to record everything. So when you have any kind of interaction with a government official or especially a police officer, but anyone from the government, you secretly record on audio. And you don't tell them that you're recording because you can get stuff on record and it's best that they don't know about it, at least at the time, and you build a database on it and you go public with it, anonymously if you need to. There are times when if they're threatening you with an actual gun or stuff like that, you can swap to video record and you live stream that shit. You set things up to live stream. It's important to set this stuff up. So you live stream that shit so they can't take it down. You get it on live stream and then you fight back. And don't just fight back and then run away. Fight back and keep fighting and don't back down. It's important that you do not back down and you don't give them an inch, because you give them an inch, they'll take a mile. You draw a line and you fucking kill anyone who crosses it. You enforce the law. And the people you need to enforce the law against are the very people who claim to be the law. These are the police and the government and politicians and the social services and medical establishment and stuff like that. These people who are given these special powers of the government, they're all corrupt. Everyone knows they're all corrupt. Stop lying and pretending because it's convenient. And deal with this shit. Deal with it personally. Deal with corrupt police officers personally. Old school style. So, when you get a new police force, what do? Well, we're living in 2018 as I'm saying this video right now. It's 2018 now. And this video might be watched in the future, who knows. But, you have, despite what they say, this is very cheap to do, very cheap and very easy to do, is every police officer at all times, from the moment he starts his shift to the moment he signs off the shift, they record. They have a body camera where they record every moment of their shift, from start to finish. If any part is missing from the recording, they're fired, and they can never work for the government ever again. Zero tolerance. They can't turn off their body cam and then turn it back on. You do that, no, you pay serious consequences. You go to prison for that. A police officer who does not have his body camera on at all times goes to prison, even if he's not accused of any crime. If he is, there are even more serious consequences, and he doesn't get away with it. So police officers must be required to have body cameras on at all times. This is not 1,000 years ago. This is today. This is very easily doable today. There's no excuse why it doesn't be that way. Every single police officer doesn't have a body camera on 100% of the time. There's no excuse. Only just to claim ignorance. So when you have body cameras on 100% of the time, they can't do this shit. Not while they're on duty, at least. Anything they do that's corrupt, they have to do off duty. And when they're on duty recorded, when they're on duty, there's nothing they can do when they can't do this shit when they're on duty, because it's all traceable. So body cameras, well, it's viable to push for that now, before reinstalling a new police service. Push more body cameras now, 100% of the time. It's important to push for this, because and if anyone argues that it's too expensive, go through the costs and show that it costs shit all. It costs a tiny fraction of the total police income. And because the police are notoriously corrupt, take it out of their income. There's a lot I could say about police corruption. I've given you videos on this YouTube channel, all kinds of examples of this shit. I have zero tolerance for this. It only exists because you allow it. Stand up to this shit. Fight back. They pull a gun on you, they threaten you, beat the fuck out of them and kill them. Zero tolerance. Just because they have a police badge doesn't give them the right to do this. Fight back and don't back down. My very torturers were coming to me every single day, telling me that they were intimidated by me while they're torturing me, because I never backed down, even while tortured. If I can do that under such extreme duress, why can't you do it when it's not even an inconvenience? Choose a side, choose wisely, own the consequences. If you don't want to be part of a better world, if you're not gonna get up and do something about this shit, then you don't deserve a better world. You deserve to die with the rest of this shit. A new world is coming, and the old world is dying. And the old world is making a last desperate stand to cling to power for as long as it can, and it would destroy everything to prevent a new world. It would destroy everything, rather than let go of its parasitic bond. And that's what evil is doing right now today. A lot of it is giving up on hope of any future power, and it's just said, fuck it, if I'm going to go down, I'm going to take you down with me. That's what they're doing. Realise this is war. New South Wales Police are a force of evil. They are a rogue organisation. They are entirely illegitimate. Every time you see any kind of corruption and inappropriate shit on a New South Wales police officer, do something about it. Zero tolerance. Be the police. Be the underground, anonymous, secret police. And do it on a global scale. There's a lot more I could say. I was talking to you for, was it half an hour or something, or 40 minutes. But deal with this shit. Do something about it. Have zero tolerance for police corruption. And the New South Wales police are a perfect example of a police state, of police corruption, how bad shit is. I could talk for hours on this shit and show you how bad the New South Wales police are and what they do. Look into this yourself. A lot of this stuff will be censored on the internet, or the government documents on this shit have been taken down. But I've got a lot of them that haven't, that before they were taken down. But you can still find a lot of shit on New South Wales police corruption. And do something about it. Don't sit there and just complain about it. Don't just share it on social media and say, this is bad. Why doesn't someone do something about it? No, you do something about it. Organise with other people to do something about it. Organise with me to do something about it. Don't do this just to corrupt police. Do this to any kind of corruption, any kind of abuse, any kind of violation of the spirit of law. This is what Anonymous is. It is the true United Nations of the people, not of despots and politicians and corrupt liars. This is a legitimate United Nations run by the people. We are the police. And we don't need any government's approval to enforce the rule of law. Now, understand what I'm saying here. It might sound extreme to some, but it's not extreme. When someone threatens your life, you kill the fucker. When someone threatens your life, your legacy, or your heritage, kill the fucker. It is your right in self-defense. The government doesn't want you to know that you have these rights. They are progressively trying to override the rule of law and override the law and give themselves special rights and take away your rights progressively. Don't tolerate that shit. And it doesn't matter if they've made some bizarre new law under the table that's not even legitimate to say that they have these special rights to do this and that. Say, no you don't. I don't recognise that. Bye-bye. Bang. Kill the fuckers. They try to do this shit on you, kill the fuckers. Hunt every fucking one of them down. I thought I'd add one more bit. Is, how do you install a new police force and where do you start? Where do you build it from? Well, you give that job to the military. You reform the military and have it as a primary focus of dealing with threats to a nation from within as their primary focus, and threats to their nation from without as their secondary focus. So focus, more importantly, is focus on problems internally. Sort your own shit out first before you go sorting other people's shit out. And when you do involve yourself in other countries internationally, you're taking away from your own internal policing. So there's a balance there. So you reform the military and you give them the job of police. Let them actually serve their country in a meaningful way, instead of serving political and corporate agendas of making money overseas. Now, you don't just have body cameras on them at all times. You completely disarm them. Zero weapons. There's no justification for arming police. It's all bullshit. It's all oppression and evil, corrupt shit. There's no justification for arming police. You completely disarm them so that they are not a threat to the very community. And they actually earn the respect of the community. But sure, there are times where you need to use force against certain criminals. Well, the price of everyday situations of having armed police going around is just not worth it. The cost is too high. But since you have the military as responsible for policing and being their primary focus, but not exclusive focus, is the military, when they need to be, they are armed. So they generally have them disarmed when it comes to internal issues, such as policing, and have the ability to arm themselves later as they need to, when they need to do something to arm themselves with. So they need to call an armament, They can call an armament, but police who are just patrolling the streets, they should never be armed in the first place. There is a time and a place for armed police, and most of the time it's not appropriate. They should not be walking around with guns in a place where everyone else is disarmed, especially. That's oppression. That's corrupt, evil shit. There's no justification for that. In a lot of places in the world, police are just not armed at all. Not even with a baton. Nothing. Armed with a body camera, where they record internally, and they have a backup recording going on wireless connected to their police car. And their police car, if necessary, can connect to a satellite or whatever, and connect and upload it to a database live stream. Their defense is their body camera. They don't need weapons, especially against their own people. It's like wielding a gun against your own family, like your own children. You want your own children to live a good life and behave themselves and follow laws and stuff like that, and morality and stuff like that, and do the right thing. You don't walk around with a gun in your pocket, threatening to shoot, intimidating them that you're going to shoot them if they cross the line. There's no justification for that shit. It's pure evil. So not only should things be done with the military, as I said, you have the job of police. They don't have a fixed position. They move around. They change positions regularly. For a short time, they're a police officer. Then they're back to doing other external military services. No one's a permanent in a permanent position. You do shifts in different positions. And the military is trained in both internal and external issues. So soldiers who go overseas, they have some kind of sense of their own people and what they're actually defending. They're actually connected to the people they're defending because they've actually defended those people for real. And on the same side, those who who are policing their own nation, they understand external problems because they're trained in both areas. It's necessary to be trained in both areas. This is why there are military problems and police problems, because they have a limited frame of reference. And the only people in the military the only people among police and military are military people who have fought overseas, realize they've fought for the wrong thing, and then they've seen what police are doing, and that's even worse than what they were doing, and they start fighting against it, and they get shot by police. So you completely get rid of the police, not just in New South Wales, everywhere. You get rid of the police completely. You have a big inquisition. You imprison and give the death penalty to every corrupt police officer, as a lesson for anyone to come who's corrupt, they will suffer the same fate. And you reform the military and put them into a universal policing position where you swap shift and different thing, and you have a body camera 24/7, and your body camera is your defense. There's a lot I could say on it, but I thought I'd just mention that last bit about putting the job into the military. So the military aren't just hanging around training for a war that will never happen and milking a government for money and constantly being a threat to the government with their weapons. And now it's all fucked up how it works. It doesn't have to be that way. And there's nothing advanced in understanding this shit. It's common fucking sense. But no one has the balls to stand up against evil and do something about it. I always have. I've paid the ultimate price for it. Who is willing to stand up beside me and help me fight evil in the world and actually do something about it for real?